share them with another. Again,
take some pride in it.
Document it, archive it, augment it, and you're going to see kids really take ownership of it, really get excited by it, and also be reflective about it. And you can build, language outcomes into these media archival, media literacy skills kind of activities. So the next principle is the sandbox principle. So when we just came from the fish tank, now we're moving to the sandbox.
Right.
And you can see how this is kind of inspired by a lot of games, play, this kind of thing.
Creativity.
There's no silver bullet here. We're not, we are hunting werewolves, but there's no silver bullet. So there's ways you can make that vocab more interesting than just a vocab journal. Any of this sort of stuff can be captured as performance through media. And what's great about these media elements we're creating through EdTech is that if they're going through this for months or for semesters or for years.
TEFL ideas. Right, so what's the next section of these principles? Kenny G, I call him Kenny G.
Kenny G.
Get Paul G.
Yeah, right? Get the saxophone in there.
I've been in China too long. Called him great. Kenny G. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next cluster is project or challenge-based learning, and we've already been really introducing this through the empowered learners perspective. So a lot of this is PBL. There's a lot of that out there. We're talking about the two key turnkeys on PBL are, I think, are audience and purpose. Look, games give the user a great quest. They give them a compelling, simple mission, right? The world is at stake, or at least the Mushroom Kingdom.
It's escapism. Yeah. It's a fantasy. It's getting away from the mundane reality of doing actual work. That's what the argument might be. It's like, this is why we tell students to stop playing. We actually tell them to stop playing games.
Right.
So how do you challenge that perception?
Well, yeah, I would say that it is escapism, and I do love the escapism of literature and of art and of even studies. Sometimes.
We need it.
Yeah, but great project. Projects could be escapism. It could be creating a game, or creating a model, or creating art is a project, right? And that can be connected to all kinds of outcomes. But so can community-based projects or challenge-based projects, like the one I was outlining earlier. Like how do you reduce solid waste in the community? That's a challenge that could really drive a whole semester of civics or of environmental science or of what have you. So in video games, how do you make this work? Look, video games have clear win states. You know when you win. You know when you beat the level. You know when you beat the boss. You know when the world is saved. And all of these are sequenced very nicely, and they have, they take time to celebrate it. They take time to create tokens, and they give you feedback, right? If you fail, it's not, you lose a couple. Sometimes it's you lose points, but a lot of times is you can't get to the next level, right? I can't figure out how to get across this chasm. I can't figure out how to sail across the sea. I haven't, recruited enough members on my ship, right? I haven't gotten enough rapport to do this sort of project. So it's not like kids are sort of forced into the next level, like they often are in math or in ESL, right? You push the kids through. So with leveling, one of the key principles is sequencing. So in video games, the first level is always easy, right? You're introduced to the world, to the general quest. There's a hook, but the mechanics are never automatically all the way on in the first level. But you acquire, for instance, an inventory. You learn how to jump. You learn how to pick something up. And then you go and you practice that for a while. And the second level, maybe you introduce some new mechanics, some new complexity, and you're able to practice that. And
so they get through on merit rather than kind of getting, gaming it or fudging it or getting pushed through.
Yeah. Well, so that's what assessments are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to give us clear data on who is where in their competency regime and what we need to do for interventions to get them up.
They do that to an extent, but they're not exactly perfect, are they, assessments?
No, they're not. But data or technology can really help us make the data more useful, help us systematize these checkpoints. I use this in my, I run an EdTech, I run a flipped classroom for my humanities course.
Right, I've noticed that, yeah.
And so I do a couple things. Most of my work is still in class, but I do a couple of things which really help drive my teaching, which are done totally through our LMS, our learning management system, our Moodle platform. And one of those is just reading comprehension assessments. And I can quickly go and see who's read the book and how good their reading is based on the data I get back from those quizzes. But I had this moment this week where I was realizing that kids were kind of getting bored with the same old operations in my course. It's because I didn't design them. I kind of designed them as a huge open space rather than a stair-stepped challenging model. So I kept having them I was doing this jigsaw approach where I was having them each take an artist or a work of art from the chapter and then present it, give us the main points and this kind of thing from the chapter. And so it's the third week we've done this, and they're clearly kind of getting tired. They're kind of getting lazy with it, and they're not challenged with it anymore. So I decided to level it up. And I said, look, we need to I updated the rubric. I said, look, we need to update this thing, make it more interesting, make it more challenging. And so I added another level of complexity into that old game. So it's kind of like in Zelda or Mario, where now we've got a new type of jump, which we can use to climb to new heights in this level. It's a little bit harder to pull off with the buttons, but you're able to do more with it. And you feel more engaged, and you feel more confident after achieving those things.
All right.
So this is sequencing, right? We don't want to just throw them into the gladiatorial arena. Like a lot of people in liberal or progressive education like these rich, stimulating environments. Throw them out into the garden and let them kind of play, and they'll get something out of that.
Is that like the sort of bootstrapping philosophy of just leave them to their own devices and let them tough it out in the environment?
Yeah, and I think that has a real important function. This sort of deliberate play, and we'll talk about that later. But in unit design or curriculum design, it doesn't work.
It has to be structure.
It has to be tapered in. It has to be scaffolded. In TEFL, we talk about scaffolding, right?
Yeah.
You have to, take them at successive levels, and each level has to build on the last. Use those skills and outcomes you mastered in level 1, add on them slightly level 2. Beat the boss, demonstrate you've mastered it. You can move on, and now let's do it. That's an ideal sense of it. It's very academic, and not everyone's always going to be able to produce 100%, in a real classroom. But these are real good light posts to be using as you design things.
Good.
So the next is the pleasantly frustrating principle, which we already talked about, which is I+1, which Vygotsky talks about when he talks about the zone of proximal development,
right? Yeah,
where we're kind of tugging along at each learner's.
I call it measured tension.
What?
Yeah, it's basically what I said in the last edition of the podcast was, if you make it too easy, they get bored and give up. If you make it too hard, you get the same things. So there's a Goldilocks zone of measured tension, I call it.
And the challenge is that every kid has a different zone, right? Every kid is at a different area. So what's great about technology, which has long been the appeal of technology, is that from the get-go, decades ago, people were talking about adaptive profiling for students, where computers could be collecting this data and saying, well, this is where Tommy needs to be, this is where Sally needs to be. At the very least, this data can be made available to teachers to say, probably these kids need some more individual attention. Those kids can move on to level 2. This kid should be a TA. This kid should be in a remedial course, right? Something like this. We want to be quick. And of course, I'm not saying this is how it should be done, but it's a part of the mix, right? We never want to make great decisions for students' futures based off this data, which is kind of the dilemma or the tragedy of standardized testing, or of really relying on standardized testing to an extreme degree. But in a flipped class, you can do these. You should use them as formative assessments, not summative assessments. So give the assessments, make quick, lean assessments for reading, writing, speaking, listening, intermittently, that you can say who's with it, who's doing the work, and who's not, and then how can you do interventions for those kids. So that would be my recommendation for TEFL flipping.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the areas to look at in speaking, there's 5, which is listening is a speaking skill in a way, grammar, vocabulary, fluency, and is that 5? Grammar, vocabulary, listening, fluency, and pronunciation. And so if you get used to the same students every day or every week, and you start giving them, like you said, a lean assessment. I'll give you an arbitrary, subjective, quick little bum, 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 bum.
Yeah.
at the end of each class, and over time you start to say, right, you're definitely below, and you get a very good feeling, and you get very good at notice. I mean, I've been doing this for so long that I can meet this new student, and within about a minute, I know exactly what their strengths and weaknesses are, I know exactly what their level is. And I think for a lot of teachers, it takes time to get used to get aware of other people's language, like in that respect. But yeah, so I think, do that. Find out their weaknesses by giving them regular assessments.
Yes, and so there should be a whole other course on designing these assessments, because they can take such a variety of forms. They don't have to be multiple choice questions, right? They can look like all kinds of different media deliverables, these kind of things, which the technology is getting better at systematizing.
Well, if you look at any sort of exam, I mean, Western countries are guilty of this too, but especially in China, the typical Gaokao English exam, it's a multiple choice. It's not communicative at all, and it's basically tests how well you know the minutiae of grammar points, which is not communicative. It's not relevant.
Well, they're taking it out. Have you heard this?
Well, I hope so.
They're taking English out of the Gaokao now.
I thought they just lowered the points on it. Lowered the weighting.
I heard they're taking it out.
Oh well, that might not be a bad idea actually. You know.
Yeah.
Because it's not done in a communicative way, so you get all these people, legions of people,
yes,
who are very skilled at the minutiae of English grammar points, far more than a native speaker might be able, but yet not. With no fluency, the pronunciation's all shot, and it's hard to understand. You know, you get communication breakdowns when in speaking. So maybe the Gaokao needed to be completely overhauled, and it's. But I digress. But you know,
it's good.
Yeah,
it's huge. You know, Gaokao drives our market here.
The Gaokao, if you don't know what that is, it's the be all and end all Chinese college entrance exam, and it's a massive high stakes. Closes doors on people and things like that, and the quotas to get into Chinese colleges are very low, so it's a very high pressure exam, and traditionally it's been very rigorous and tough, hasn't it? You know, and the English, it's pretty basically the English that they test on it is comes from the sort of grammar translation school of teaching English, right?
Yeah, and different provinces don't exactly they don't have it super standardized. So kids in Guangdong have a different Gaokao than other kids. And EdTech and Gaokao is a project I was working on for a while when I was in Shenzhen with the Shenzhen Education Bureau. I would love to talk about that more. That's a whole other podcast as well.
I mean, I was looking at some of the questions there for the composition essay writing, and these are what you'd see in an exam to get into Oxford or something like.
Right. That's probably where they took them.
Tough.
Yeah.
Deeply philosophical issues about morals and ethics and things like that. And I mean, I think perhaps
conundrums.
Yeah, very hard moral dilemmas.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress.
So we got a couple more principles we're going to go over today. Did we talk about cycle of expertise?
No.
Okay. Cycle of expertise is where you systematically level these things up. Learning happens through deliberate practice with guidance and feedback. Expertise, when you become an expert or a master, is about getting these affinity spaces where you get the kind of practice and feedback. That's what deliberate practice is about. It's about meaningful practice, not just doing it, not just writing, not just copying, but doing it mindfully and attentively, and then getting feedback from some sort of coach or guide on how that works. This works in musicians, right? This works in writers or artists or anybody. I'm sure you're familiar. You've heard of 10,000 hour rule and this kind of thing.
I haven't seen Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, exactly.
It's got to be true, really. I mean, it's common sense. That stuff. I mean, Malcolm Gladwell's been criticised on a lot of things, but I think I don't think anyone would really argue with the 10,000 hour rule makes you into a genius, right? In any field.
But you become an expert.
Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, if you're doing 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, really, and that's where that's the variable. That's the key point that everyone misses. Is you can't just show up, punch the clock for 10,000 hours, right?
But you've got to enjoy it. You've got to give it everything, right?
Well, if we can get kids more into that flow state, more into the driven sort of stuff, then they can do it. But cycle of expertise is about giving them space for the practice, right? Work on scales, master scales. Then we're going to come back. You know, you're not doing it right, get it right, then they work it, then they can do it. It becomes black boxed, is what Jim Paul G calls it. Where it's
like that too.
It's just routine, and then you move it to the next level. Like you can do fractions without thinking about it. You can do now it's time to move on to the next level. And then practice that until your hand hurts and until it's long term, and then take it on the next level. So this can be done with language teaching. It's one of these things that's a little more challenging with language teaching, but it can certainly be done with key stock phrases, with cognates and this sort of thing.
Well, look, anything worth doing takes a considerable amount of time to master it. And, like committing things to long-term memory, that's all about repetition and so on. And fluency is based on your ability to do that. So
we can build this cycle of expertise thing, just like the sequencing principle, into how you're delivering your flipped course in TEFL. And they should be those to demonstrate the mastery or expertise. Again, students should be it should be performance based, and there should be some data produced on that, which the instructor could quickly pick up and scan for intervention points.
Right.
So the next one, I think, is where we really get into some interesting stuff. This is where JPG kind of interjects some literacy and some linguistics into this.
Right.
And he talks about how we use information. And this is called the just-in-time or on-demand information principle. And the idea is that games don't provide us with giant blocks of text, like a textbook or something like this from the get-go, right?
Yeah.
But they put you in a world, on a quest, and then when you need to go find information, they present it just in time. Like when you're driving a car, you don't start by looking through the atlas. But what's useful is a GPS system. Or what's useful is getting lost and then, okay, now I need the map, right? So that's how we work as well, right? You don't start out by saying, I want to learn about the U.S. history and then pick up a textbook.
No.
But maybe you're driven by a more specific question, right? Maybe you've been engaged, maybe you've been motivated or inspired by a game, for instance, Civilization 5. You've been playing Egypt for a while, and then you decide, I want to go read a bit about Egypt. So that's...
It's done in a piecemeal way, and it's done in an ad hoc way, and it's done very much without sometimes too much direction, but you do it by going off on tangents and getting there eventually, right? In a natural, organic way.
So, right, and all these kids are getting bombarded with giant textbooks which nobody asked for, right? We say, read pages, da-da-da. Instead of assigning reading, we should be assigning challenge questions, right? Learn about, or tell me, how did the colonies deal with taxation from the crown, right? Or what happened with the encounters with the Native Americans in the 16th century at the early colonists? This kind of thing is much more driving than read pages, da-da-da.
Yeah, totally.
So giving them this just-in-time or on-demand. And with projects, it's even greater. Like, for instance, solve this community issue of waste production. Well, let's go find an expert who has the information. Let's go on Wikipedia. Let's find some tributaries to explore before we just throw kids off the dock into the ocean. So that's just-in-time or on-demand information.
That's what you do when you learn things yourself without a teacher, right? Well, I've been learning programming lately, and every time I hit a brick wall every time, and that's right. Okay, YouTube tutorial, right. And I've just built up I've built up hundreds of bookmarks in every field of programming now because I've just done it all and very organically. And it's a massive breakthrough when you get the answer, you learn that skill, and I think it's learning on your own volition is really much better than having a teacher. A lot of the time, is a lot better than a teacher just directing you all the time, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely. But the teacher can facilitate that, and not everybody's driven naturally with that kind of initiative, right? But that initiative or that mindset or that perspective can be cultivated. So that's what we're after with this sort of disruptive, I think, empowering edtech TEFL model. The next one is called the fish tank principle. The fish tank principle is about parsing out complexity. Because whenever we approach real world problems, we're dealing with complexity. Whenever we're dealing with real issues, they're complex issues. But it's difficult to look at all of history, or all of psychology, or all of environmental science, or all of conflict and war, and talk about it. So what we want to do is take pieces of that issue and put them into a smaller environment, like a fish tank. We don't go out and study the ocean, but we can take elements of an ecosystem and watch how that system interacts. So we can take a fish or a couple fish and see how they play.
Yeah.
We can take plant life and see how that. And so we simplify the issue and then study it in some way.
You put it in a microcosm, don't you? And that's really healthy. Your classroom's a little microcosm of the world, essentially, isn't it? You want to be raising horizons in there for preparing them for getting out in the world and using that language in the world. And the classroom is where we create this fake little fish tank, right?
Absolutely. And here, I think for language teaching, the kids become, right, the elements, as you said. But we can also invite students to think scientifically and systematically about what's going on in, for instance, a role play. So if you're role-playing a debate, if you're role-playing a court case, if you're role-playing a drama, sexual harassment, something like that, you can have kids who are not just spectators, but they're analysts, or they're psychologists,
right?
Or,
Different
or
lawyers,
behavioral, right? This sort of thing, and say, what behavior did you note? How would you change that? What could this character do? What does this mean in this perspective? So here, while they're probably not arguing a case at the Supreme Court case level, they're still able to approach that. They're still able to engage in the microcosm.
Yeah, that's right. You get this nice little, a reflection of reality, don't you, in the classroom? And look, if they can just do like you said, it's not the Supreme Court. It's never going to be absolutely authentic. But you know what? It's a model of it, and it's close enough. And you get a taste of that. That language and that experience, and that little taste of it, it's of the model.
Yeah,
is gold. Actually,
it can change lives. It can change kids' total kind of future or trajectory. And a little spice. Talk about a little taste, but a little spice of multimedia ratchets this stuff up to the next level. So instead of just doing a one-off role play, have a kid take a video of it and post it on the platform. Or have groups go and act it out somewhere and then share those videos and have them revisit them or post them on their social media, share them with another. Again,
take some pride in it.
Take some pride in it, document it, archive it, augment it, and you're going to see kids really take ownership of it, really get excited by it, and also be reflective about it. And you can build language outcomes into these media archival, media literacy skills kind of activities. So the next principle is the sandbox principle. So we just came from the fish tank, now we're moving to the sandbox.
Right.
And you can see how this is kind of inspired by a lot of games, play, this kind of thing. Creativity. So a lot of games are called sandbox games. A great example of this is Grand Theft Auto. Are you familiar with this game?
Yeah, I am. Is Minecraft is a sandbox?
Minecraft is a pure sandbox. Yeah. There's no real plot. Right. There's no real levels. There's levels in a sense where you can find rare materials and new recipes and make new things, but it's the beauty of a sandbox. Now coming to a real sandbox as a kid or on a beach is that it's a safe place. It's a bounded place, right?
Yeah.
It's a box. No one's being judged. No one's being ranked. No one's being graded. But you feel effective. You're able to build. You're able to play. You're able to model.
Without any judgment, without any fear of failure.
And exactly. So that's exactly right. Our school system is totally obsessed with this idea of everything you do is graded. Everything you do is point allocated. And so many kids, I think, are just terrified of it, or they're bored of it. And it really hinders, it injects stress, tension, and anxiety in so many ways.
Well, there's a talking about the sandboxing. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, do it.
There's a John Cleese video. I suggest. Have you seen it?
No.
John Cleese he was famous in the 90s and stuff for going around doing like business training and motivation and training business skills and things. And because he's a very clever, witty man. And anyway, there's a video that he does on creativity, and it's a lecture to a group of businessmen, I think it is, business people in Brussels, I think. Anyway, we'll put the link on there, but he talks about exactly this principle of like, okay, if you really want to be creativity is, there's loads of smart people in the world. There's not a million creative people in the world. If you want to be creative, people find it hard, especially in this day and age. And what he said you have to do is create a sandbox, essentially, and that means cutting off all distractions and creating an environment for yourself where nothing is stupid. And you do not take yourself seriously. And he's very much anti people who take themselves too seriously. And John Cleese just has this brilliant, witty video about, well, how do you get this? You have an environment where nothing is stupid, nothing is impossible, there is no such thing as failure. And once you get in that zone, then you start to get wonderful creative ideas.
Well, you lower the adaptive filter on yourself and your own thinking.
Right.
To put it in TEFL terms, we talk about lower the adaptive filter. So just get kids to produce. Get them to produce. Get them to do. Get them to think. Get them to speak. Get them to listen. And then later on worry about refining it.
Yeah, right.
Same thing with creative process. No one's going to start with gems fully, realized and deliver this fully grown thing into the world. But
when you're brainstorming and getting them to brainstorm in groups, the point of brainstorming is you don't judge any of the ideas. You just get it's about quantity first and quality later. If you have 1,000 ideas, a few of them are going to be good. You can guarantee that because the quantity's there. So that's what we have to encourage with students. Is like when you're brainstorming, let it breathe. Don't interrupt them. Let them get on with it. Get everything out there.
Yeah.
You can start judging them, looking at the quality of them later on.
Yeah. So how does this interplay with TEFL and with EdTech and flipped classrooms? There's so many great apps out there that can just be video or audio hangout sessions where you don't even have to be there as an educator. You don't even have to be there as a teacher. But you can assign a topic. You can assign a facilitator. You can assign people with different responsibilities. And they need to record it or post it on Google Hangouts does this automatically. You can automatically post it to YouTube or a private channel if you want. Kids can watch each other talk about a point. And what you'll see is they're just having fun with it. They're just talking. They're just hanging out. And if you get somebody who can make sure they're doing it in English, that's all the better. So that's a basic kind of EdTech, flipped, language-based sandbox is Skype, Google Hangout, this kind of thing. Instant chat works as well. If you're hanging out with your kids on Instant Chat, that's okay too.
Moodle is not really.
Moodle has chat functions and hangout functions.
Okay.
Yep, we have all that functionality. You just have to. I'll show you how to do it.
All right, show me how to do that. Yeah.
The other thing is you could create virtual or simulated spaces, which actually are sandboxes. So you mentioned Minecraft.
Yeah.
We could host a Minecraft server here. It's free. Or maybe they have to pay for Minecraft. It's like $8. But and they could have their headset on, and they could have projects that they do as groups. This group has to build a castle. This group has to do this. This group has to find this. And then they can offer. You can turn Minecraft into a TEFL game.
There's no rules to Minecraft. That's the beauty of it. You can do what you want in there.
And so it's a play space. It's a simulated sandbox where they can just go on and do. Another great, besides Minecraft, there's a game called Second Life, which is totally free, which is an online MMO, which is kind of like WoW or one of these massively.
You can get elected as governor of the city and stuff like that, can't you?
Yeah, you can do literally anything you can imagine on Second Life. People use it for cyber conferences.
Right.
If you don't, now we're doing conferences online where instead of flying to Dallas, you get a free e-ticket, and you show up. You create yourself an avatar. You project yourself into a simulated conference space, and everyone else is you go to workshops and this sort of thing. It's kind of cool.
It's been around a while. Minecraft's been around a while. These things,
but and some teachers have used this. Right, professors have done this and stuff. I'm sure ESL teachers are using it. I would love to see more of it. I would love to hear from you if you are doing it. If you want to get something started, let's get it going.
I think we're waiting for the next leap on augmented reality. We've sort of plateaued a bit, and we're waiting for what's Zuckerberg working on this new thing right now. I think there's lots of possibilities in the future. It's going to explode.
I think within 5 years, within 3 years maybe, we're going to have these like Windows 10. They say has VR drivers built in.
Right.
You can plug and play those Oculus headsets.
That's right.
And developers have those kits to make the 3D space. I would love to see this as a art history or humanities teacher to be able to take kids on a tour through the Colosseum or go through like walk through it. Imagine that.
Yeah.
It would be cool even on a computer screen to have them walk through the space, but to have them actually fully immersed in it. Talk about immersion in a space, but also immersion in the language. If they could walk into a cafe or this sort of thing, then the courtroom becomes not a role play but a simulation. And I think we're a couple years away from that.
Yeah.
So sandbox is huge, and you can build different sandboxes in your classroom, even if it's not flipped. The last one we're going to do for this session is skills under strategies. And this is one we talked about last session. Brian had a question about notes. We wanted to develop kids. We want to have kids taking notes. It's an important skill. It's a metacognitive skill. It's a learning skill to take notes. But kids don't see the value in it. They don't see the use in it because taking notes are a skill, but they should be used as a skill to achieve something more. They should be used as a strategy to do something. So in a video game, you learn the skill of casting a spell or of long jumping or what have you to defeat the boss or to win the princess or to get some reward. You should be taking notes to do something like completion, at least on a test, or perhaps working through a lab. Bring out your notes if you're kind of lost. You have the vocab in there, or deciphering a code, working through a role play or listening exercise. Well, go into your notes. You have this in your notes, or go back to your textbook, or use that resource, Or in literacy and reading skills, we talk about having kids be able to make line references. When you write a response to a text, reference the point. Quote the author, cite the author, and
it's a very good habit to get into, to develop these learning styles, particularly taking notes.
Right.
And it's useful in all areas of life as well. I think what you find in life generally is that successful people tend to write down ideas when they have them. They tend to make use of their note function on their phone, and they have that very good. They teach their brain. They have a certain way of teaching the brain that they realise that the brain's going to forget stuff. And right. I think what you have with students is they don't get that yet.
Well, they don't get it yet. Some kids do, some kids don't. But people who are doing this, who are taking notes, who are thinking, when you write something down, it's because you're saying, I could use that later.
Yeah.
I can use that to solve a problem. I can use this in my project. I can use this in my book. Kids aren't attached to those kind of projects or they're not thinking about those kinds of ideas yet, right? They're thinking about, my God, this is boring. What's the point in this?
Right.
So we need to be kind of building this stuff into it, making it more like a game or more like a challenge or more like a project and less like going through the book.
Less drudgery.
So another example in TEFL teaching is vocab. We're always teaching loads of vocab, 40 words a week at our school, maybe per class. And it's hard to make all that seem worthwhile. There's no silver bullet here. We're not, we are hunting werewolves, but there's no silver bullet. So there's ways you can make that vocab more interesting than just a vocab journal. Not just definitions, but have them remix those vocab words into telling a story. Right? There's a game called Connect 2. I didn't invent this game. Some vocab researcher talks about it. Instead of just writing one rich context sentence with a vocab term, connect 2 and make a sentence. That's a little game you can play.
Nice.
Well, you can do the same thing with telling a story, and all of a sudden it becomes much more fun, entertaining. You can have them recorded at home. Post the video or audio online for their friends to hear or their peers to see. And they can connect that vocab, and through storytelling, have them use it in a report, make a speech, make a poster, creative art, graffiti, any of this sort of stuff can be captured as performance through media. And what's great about these media elements we're creating through EdTech is that if they're going through this for months or for semesters or for years, you're going to get this beautiful timeline emerge of this kid's language learning. And this is kind of my mission with the curriculum here is for the new cohort coming in July, we're going to have, for the next 3 years of their life, we're going to be collecting a timeline of media. And maybe people will be terrified of this, right? Big Brother collecting all this media. Well, we're not going to necessarily release it to the public, but we're going to be able to have a portfolio of this kid's language growth and intellectual growth, too, in a lot of cases, that they can look back on.
They can recycle all that stuff and learn it again. It gets forgotten, doesn't it? It's there as a record.
Or teachers can use it again and use it as models of projects for years to come. Or what's becoming increasingly popular with college admissions offices are interviews. We've got a lot of our top-tier schools now are saying, look, it's not enough to have great scores, to have great essays.
Oh, yeah.
Our top-level kids are doing video interviews. There's a company called, what is it called? Initial View.
Okay.
They're based in Beijing. A guy from University of Michigan, and I think his wife's from Harvard. I could link it. Great company, great people. And they go around and they do these interviews with kids, and then they create a platform, an objective, standardized interview that admissions offices can look at and say, well, what is this person like, this international ESL student like, in the conversation? And you're able to very quickly, you can imagine, sort the wheat from the chaff.
Yeah, you can look at their character, what kind of character is that person,
what they've done.
You can see how assertive they are. You can see how they sell themselves. See how good they are on a personal and character level rather than just an academic level.
Yeah,
which is important,
Yeah.
So that's a good development. Doing prepping people for interviews. They need that's a skill that's often lacking at this time. Being able to show off their skills.
So that's what's great about this whole EdTech enhanced, empowered teaching and learning, flipped classroom model is that it creates these durable tokens that can force students and teachers to be a little more mindful, to be a little more reflective about what's going on, what are they producing, why are they doing it, and you can also get a lot of efficiency and economy, as we've said earlier, with time. The technology can be a time saver. It can automatically give us data. It can automatically sort tasks for us, such as review, repetition, spacing. But more importantly, it can really change the way we're doing to make things more 21st century.
Well, there's two things that spring to my mind. Is that it's more humanistic approach. It gives them a lot more freedom to follow their own direction.
Well, I love that you said that, because most people look at technology. Most of the old guard say it's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
We don't want to be robots.
It's behaviorist.
Yeah, and that's, and it can be. And here's the thing. So this model I'm proposing, or I'm integrating, I'm adopting from JPG, James Paul G, is a design approach. It's a human, student-centered, teacher-centered, ed tech infused design approach for creating hopefully, I think, a more human and a more interesting, a more fun, a more compelling curriculum.
And what the other point was, because it's more holistic as well. It gives them you get a more rounded learner at the end of the day. Someone who perhaps is able to do a better interview.
Yeah.
Someone who is able to actually think and approach new subjects and new areas with a bit more self-assertiveness, self-confidence. And a bit more confidence, really, because it's a bit more holistic. It's getting them to use a much larger range of skills and thinking skills and so on. That's not usually been the case in the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm having fun with it. We're not taking this too seriously. There's a lot of sound and fury here. There's a lot of academic and esoteric ideas, and the devil's always in the details. It's always an execution. I'm working through it. My courses are not perfect. They're not ideal. But, using these principles and coming back again to these makes me think about, and they work. I've seen them when I apply these things. It changes kids. It changes how they act in class. It changes how I'm designing my assessments. What's the bugbear? Systemic curriculum, standardized tests. Do teachers have the power to be taking time back to do this kind of things? Not everybody.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that kind of freedom. But a lot of times you can demonstrate, JPG talks about this, is when you can get kids to do the project, the challenge-based stuff, you get test mastery, you get skill, fact acquisition, as well as deeper critical thinking skills as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, the real world demands it. The real world, the standardized curriculums and tests and systemic curriculums and so on, they may be lagging. They're lagging behind the skills that the real world demands of people these days.
Yeah.
And that's, if you look at, for example, IQ tests and how they've changed, the big belief was that people are getting smarter all the time. It's not. It's just what IQ tests test you for pattern recognition skills now. In the old days, they tested you for knowledge of facts. And people
really.
Yeah, Steven Pinker wrote a really good thing about this. And I'll put a link to it, but it's basically about how people were much more agricultural in the old days. They were much more about controlling their environment and kind of husbandry and skills like that. Yeah. And we've definitely moved out of that, and we're in this. The main skills required of children now is pattern recognition.
Yeah.
And we go around with these little these smartphones in our pockets that give us our location on the entire globe. You can search for absolutely anything. So maybe the skills is not knowing the capitals of the world. That's not really a skill. It's necessary these days. Yeah. It's not knowing the difference between a rabbit and a hare is not really. These days it's a little bit more abstract, a little bit more spatial.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right. And there's been a lot of work done in 21st century curriculum. There's some great books out there. This is more than that. This is different than that. We're talking about progressive curriculum. We're talking about kind of changing things up a little bit, making students a lot more participations.
Yeah.
The GAC is a 21st century curriculum thing. It is. It's designed on these principles.
Yeah, it's not bad.
These ideas of collaboration, communication, production, and all these sorts of 21st century skills. But it's not really student-centered, not always, and it doesn't always. It's not always super motivating, and it's not flexible enough. And so I think what this thing takes fully realized are invested teachers and an invested teacher community who have resources and platforms and who are discussing. So we're working on it, and we're looking for anybody else out there. I feel like we're in the zombie apocalypse. We're broadcasting, waiting for.
We're talking to the wall, shouting at the wall.
Yeah, but we're having fun with it.
We're going to break that wall down, though, and that's the whole point of these podcasts.
We'll get through it.
Yeah.
So stand by. I've got a couple more episodes. We've got a couple more episodes to put on this topic. This was Flipping ESL, using EdTech in TEFL, empowered teaching and learning. Today we went over the game-based learning principles repurposed for Flip TEFL. Next time, we're going to be looking at digital wisdom. We're going to be talking about digital natives, digital immigrants and the idea of social presence and how that can be a great turnkey for making flipped classrooms work.
Excellent. Right. Well, that's something to look forward to. So that's great, and I hope you've enjoyed the podcast, and I hope you've got some ideas from that as well. So look out for the next TEFL Ideas podcast, which will be pretty soon.
Outstanding. Thanks, guys.
See you. Bye.